What do you get when you combine a world-class EMS physician and medical director
I speak pretty good English for a guy from Detroit.
with an EMS veteran and all-around nice guy?
Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Oh, that's so good. Oh, my God.
Well, you get the EMS Show. Taking it to the people, here's your host, Dr. Ritu Sani and Mike Vercast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the EMS Show. Mike Vercast, Dr. Ritu Sani. We are hardcore into episode 5, and our guest has decided to walk away.
Where's our guest? Oh, he's back.
Oh, he decided to come back.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, look at, you got Ritu, who's got this studied, like, I don't give a shit sort of look to his hair, which he probably spent hours on. And then there's you.
Yes.
So with me,
that's
okay?
true.
Okay.
Hey, listen, I spent a good 0 minutes on this hairdo of mine. So,
Okay. And again, I know exactly where Ritu's doing. It's all like, oh, that's just the way it is. But no, it's hours and hours. 3 people working on it, blow dryers, a little bit of white shoe polish just to make it look like he's old.
yeah, and it's all towards the back because there's not much to speak of on that guy right here.
No,
see that?
the forehead is very large. That is true.
I would call that a 5 head.
It's like a 6 head, actually.
You've got the EMS Show.
Yeah,
It's
or maybe
almost like an enforced mullet, just the way things go. It's like, it's not like you started off with that.
I didn't say that.
No, it's not a mullet. Not,
It
not
sort of
a
is.
mullet.
It actually sort of. It's
Kind of is in its own way. Yeah.
sort of.
Not a mullet.
It's kind of a mullet. Anyway,
I like
welcome to episode 5. We are super happy to have Dr. Mike Levy with us.
maybe
and,
6. I don't know.
Listen, these two together. Let me just bring this in here. We've been pre-gaming this for 30 minutes. And if you know anything about the EMS show, or Dr. Sani for that example, you know that is way overkill. We should have hit the button a half hour ago, but these two are hilarious. I'm just going to sit back and let these two guys go. In fact, I'm going to move Dr. Levy up right next to him up there. That way those two can just keep doing their thing. Because
whoa. That's higher than I expected to be on this.
I know. I've elevated you guys. This guy here, this guy here. I don't, my thing's mirrored, so everything's backwards. So I have no idea how it's going, but
Okay.
anyway, it is so great to see everybody.
Well,
It's been nice.
see, now the recording stops and we'll be like,
I don't know what to say.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah. These guys have been going at it. We've talked everything from race cars to like just finding new jobs to like fit. I don't know. Like there's been 1,000 things we've already talked about, and we haven't even started.
No, I know. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think we just kind of jump right in, and Mike and I have known each other for a long time, right?
The longer you know somebody, the shorter it seems, not only because it seems that way, but because you forget so effing much. Right? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Familiar. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure at some point we met, but I feel I actually can't remember like officially meeting you because I feel like we've just been friends like our whole professional lives.
That's right. It's brothers of a different mother. I think I got like a 25-year pen, which is pretty amazing that they let me in at age 3 to NMESP. And so I've known you through that. I think that's probably how we first bumped into each other. Had to be probably.
Oh yeah, that's what I would think so.
So we've got the current president of NAMSP and we've got a former president of NAMSP. So is there a special handshake or coin or like shirt or like wrap around? Like you guys have a special bond because of that?
Is this real? You expect us to give that kind of keys to the kingdom away this early? I mean,
No,
really?
that's true. That's true.
And we're not going to show you the handshake.
I mean, I can only show you the handcuff on my wrist where we keep that information, the
Right.
release. He
Right.
handed it over to me at some point in time. It's pretty. Actually, Ritu started trying to do something which was so off color. It was amazing. But he wanted to call the past presidents the Dead Presidents Club.
Oh.
Yeah,
That went over well with all those dead presidents. Yeah,
the dead guys were really well. They didn't complain.
I was there.
Yeah, we even had like a dinner and I think Phil Moy came and recorded a podcast, like interviewed everybody there, and then that kind of died. I think we did it once or twice.
So, in deference to that whole idea, as you know, actually you don't know because you were cowering in terror under a desk somewhere instead of coming to the conference with the rest of us. But had you decided to attend, you would have seen that one of the things I did as the president was to set up this Legends of EMS session, in which I got the first six. The first six presidents for the organization up on stage. It was going to be called. There was five because we couldn't find a couple people actually. Paris was missing and somebody else. But anyhow, starting with Stuart, I was able to record him. It was fantastic. Anyway, called it the Legends of EMS to start with. Then I actually changed it to, because I didn't want it to sound like a bunch of old fogies.
That's what it sounded like to me.
That's it. So I thought the hook wasn't there. So I changed it to EMS, the prequel. Huh? I thought that would hit the demographic. And then I worked with the sound guys because I found out from Jerry Lynn, like at the last minute, that I had full rights over my soundtrack. They had these subwoofers, they had all this stuff, they had thousands of watts of power. And I said, well, I don't know if you ever heard Orville Peck's Legends Never Die, but I wanted this to be an ear bleeding, just kind of tear, not a full rupture of the tympanic membrane. I wanted this thing to just romp, more like you felt like a time bomb in your chest was going on with the bass line. And that's how I was supposed to do. I was supposed to come up on stage for that thing, Legends Never Die. And that was, blam, 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 supposed to be happening. And they played it at, I don't know. It was so quiet. It was like listening to a Tesla. It was just so sad. I was so disappointed. But the session itself, had you been there or two, you would have seen it was fantastic.
So you asked them to turn to 11 and they did not.
They did not. I don't think they got the joke. I guess, again, it's not these.
Not many people are going to get that turned into 11.
No, I know.
So I think it's come up before. I mean, the better thing, but you got the turn it to 11 thing, but, had the person that had the drummers that kept dying. I think that's the better line. And what is it? Another sort of spontaneous human combustion. Oh no. He
Joe Mama.
No, he died. Remember, he died because of he choked on vomit.
That's
it wasn't his own, but that's what he died of. If you haven't seen it, that probably doesn't sound quite right, but it's a great line as well.
Yeah. Well, didn't Howard Hessman just passed away, and that always, he had a role in that movie, and that made me think of that movie recently.
Huh.
Remember, he played the manager for a while, or he played a radio station exec or something. Not the manager, not the dude with the cricket bats, but a different person. But anyway, so I didn't go to any MSP. Thanks for just abusing me.
That's a serious ball bust.
It's not over. No, it's not. It's not over.
I bailed fairly late in the game because I really thought I was going to go, and then I just was in a place where I just didn't feel like it would look great for me to tell people to stop, to not have a meeting and then go to a meeting.
Yeah,
that's kind of where it was.
You made the right decision, buddy.
I texted you. I called you. I was
I know.
Like the day, I think I canceled 2 days before I was going down.
You basically told me why you didn't feel good. Why don't I feel good? Why is my gut aching? Why is my guts churning? I said, because you're going to get COVID and it's going to be a bad look. Anyway, whatever.
Well, okay. I'm glad you made a reasoned decision and one that made you feel like you climbed right up onto the moral high ground on that one.
Exactly. You did. He was at the top, the peak.
It's good. It's good to be on the peak. I wouldn't miss it for you.
Yeah. It was sad to not see everybody. And I'm looking forward to, now that COVID's completely done and gone.
Oh yeah.
Never to return. I'm looking forward to getting back out there, which I think we're going to do a lot of in the next month or two. So.
Okay.
I know I am. Shoot.
I know I am too.
I got a conference in New York, which you're going to. By the way, EMS Show live at the Initial Assessment Conference in beautiful Lake Placid, New York. Ritu and I are going to take over the entire bar. We're going to have a whiteboard, and we're going to just hang out with the people for like 2 or 3 hours. It's going to be frigging amazing. So if you are looking to get out of the house, you should come to Lake Placid, New York. Go check out initialassessmentconference.com. I'm giving them a plug. They're amazing. They're huge supporters of Fire Dog, huge supporters of our podcast, and it's going to be bitching. So come to Lake Placid.
I got to say, if you guys really want to help, build that membership, build that audience, I'm just suggesting you guys can do with this what you want. You're talking about going to the bar. Bar's fine. You can go to the party and say, hold my beer. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But you need to bring those little, maybe a boogie board or some type of one of those little plastic slides, because I'm sure they still have those luge runs up at Lake Placid.
Yes.
You get your helmet cams on, and maybe just once you've kind of gotten to the point where you feel like it's a good idea by then, the Y chromosome will help. You got to have one of those to make this make sense. And then get right at the top of that ramp. And then probably want to oil it up a little bit because it's probably not going to be as icy as you want. And I just go for it. But be sure you have your head cam. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I am all about Winter Olympics. Personally, I love the Winter Olympics. I think they're great. I would never in a million years would I ever do skeleton or any single person head first, feet first down the track ever. Would I ever do that? However, what I will say is put me and Ritu in a bobsled. Now, just put that in your mind for a second, right?
Oh, for sure.
Now, here's the thing. I would try to push, but I'd throw my knee out. My back would fucking be thrown out. But we would make it. Eventually, it's enough downhill. We would go.
We would be upside down fairly early. Who's driving? Are you driving or am I driving?
Well, are you going to push us? Who's going to do the start?
Well, no, both people push and then you jump in, and one person drives and the other one
that right there is going to be. People don't really care what happens to you once you get in the sled. Watching you guys push that sled, somehow I'm thinking that would be an event.
Yeah, I think
there's oxygen in the sled.
I'm not sure I could do the physical jump into the bobsled. When you go in, and have you watched these guys and gals? They jump in. It's very violent, right? And they got to get down. They got to hit the handle down so it comes in. They got the little chains that they're steering with. Which why they don't have a steering wheel, I have no idea. They should fashion something. Maybe it's weight. I don't know. But here's the thing. I think if Ritu made it into the sled after pushing, which I doubt, I think he would fall, trip, somehow he would be doing a header down the thing. I would be on my own. There's no brake man. I'd be fucked. I'd just say.
You know what you should have on your sled? I just thought of this. You know those leashes you do when you're on your stand-up paddleboard and the like?
Sure.
You probably want to put an ankle leash on him.
Yeah.
Just see him kind of bouncing behind your sled.
That'd be pretty good. But
I thought you were going to say though, with regard to the sports, I was thinking figure skating. If I were going to go figure skating, I would go ahead and just preemptively get my Makita out and put an external fixator on both my tibias.
Yeah,
just have that in place, knowing where this was going to end up.
Well, it's funny because I've been watching Amazing Race, which is one of my favorite shows, and my wife and I, when we watch it, we usually are like, we couldn't do that or we couldn't do that. But I've actually been thinking, what if Mike and I did this? And then we wouldn't be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to do that. We couldn't do that one. We could do. That's an eating one. We could do that one.
I would be down with that. Yeah.
So anyway,
we've completely lost all of it.
Yeah, that's exactly
this
right.
podcast, we've been going for 13 minutes and we have no idea what's happening.
Or who we're talking to.
Or even who we're talking to.
You think how I feel.
Yeah.
What about my feelings?
This is going to be hard to believe, but not everybody knows who Mike Levy is.
Yeah.
So let's kind of go who's Mike Levy? That's the question of the day. Levy rhymes with Chevy.
Appreciate that. I do.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important point right there.
Do you get a lot of Levies?
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I made it so clear for people. I don't know why it's so difficult. I tell them to go to the New York phone book, go to L, page forward to E, and go through, run through the list. Go Levy, Levy. That's me. Right there in the middle.
Yeah.
Phone.
Yeah.
So right there, you're kind of aging yourself. What's a phone book?
Oh, good point. Good point.
Yeah.
That's something you tear in half after you've done your lifting at the gym.
Mhm.
That's right.
Well known for that. Mhm.
So
Well, but that's a kind of a question, isn't it? It's
It
the guy
is.
what stands before you here. So let's see. I'm live in Alaska. Have for some time. Got 4 grown boys. They're pretty good example of what I would aspire to be if I were going to be something else. They're a good group, good team. Comes from not necessarily from doing everything their dad said, that's for sure. But their mother was kind of how that works, right? You have to have the good fortune to marry the right person, and I was had more than just simple good fortune about that. So their mother, with a little bit of help from her dad, raised 4 good kids. They're around doing their life stuff right now, so we're real proud of that. I'm an EMS physician, so I'm see, in terms of the whole bio thing, I came from Colorado, small town, went to University of Colorado, went to Chicago for 8 years for medical school and residency, did EMIM there, somehow managed to pass the hardest effing boards I ever took, which was the IM boards. And even more fortunate than that was the fact that I grandfathered in and not have to take those every few years because they were not easy. Then I had my EM thing. I went off to the Native Health Service, actually Uniformed Health Corps, became Lieutenant Commander Levy. Had the opportunity to wear a Navy uniform on the reservation in the middle of the Navajo Nation. And Don and I were there for a couple of years, which was a fascinating experience. We then went to Alaska, where I finished up the last year of my commitment to the health service. And while doing that, I also was working in private sector. And so I worked in hospital up here as an emergency physician for those years, and back in Chicago, but on the reservation in particular, I started doing EMS there and went through. And so I've always done EMS. My first EMS quote job, or voluntold, was for St. Paul Island in Alaska, which, find it on a map, good luck. It bobs around so that you could, if you're able to see Alaska from Russia, you could certainly see Dutch Harbor, the greatest catch from St. Paul, although you really can't. It's far enough away.
You mean the deadliest catch?
Oh, that's what it is. See, I don't watch as much of that sort of Alaska TV as most people.
Love that show. Love that show.
Most people do love that stuff. I don't know. So they're called the Pribilofts, but very, very interesting sort of life experiences, fun stuff. Had a medical director for multiple services up here, medical director for flight service up here, which was quite fun for 10 years. Now, for a very long time, I've been the medical director for Anchorage Fire Department for area-wide EMS for Anchorage, and for Anchorage Service Patrol, for Sala Remote Medics, for Wilderness Medics, for Fairweather LLC, where I'm the medical director, where we have medics and PAs stationed up on the North Slope and in different types of remote settings. I'm the division medical advisor for the National Ski Patrol. I am now the president of the National Association of EMS Physicians. I'm the state of Alaska EMS medical director. I'm the director for the Kenai Peninsula Borough. I'm the medical director for the safety team for AMR's IMSA safety racing team. I get to do lots of really cool stuff. I'm also the chief medical advisor for Stryker Emergency Care. I mean, I really like being me. It's pretty fantastic.
You got a couple things going on there.
Yeah. Holy shit. Oh yeah.
I thought I was busy. I only do a third of those things. So that's you have the same ADHD I do then, don't you?
I don't know if it's the same. We could probably get some biomarkers checked or something. I don't know how you figure that out.
23andMe, baby. That's how.
Is that it?
Yeah, you just go spit in a tube.
Huh.
You'll find out that you're related somehow.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we are. Somehow.
Yeah.
At some point.
Bourbon went down the wrong pipe there. Sorry. So you and Donna met when you were doing your native Is that how you guys met? Was when you were on that rotation or on that?
No, we met in Evanston, Illinois, when I was doing rotation there. She is a nurse, was a nurse, and that was a selling job. She wanted no part of that young doctor. Let me tell you. So that was full-time marketing, cajoling, lying,
The whole smash.
the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really took a concerted effort. My whole marketing team had to be on this one, I'll tell you.
Had to pull in the whole team, huh? This was
The
not
whole
just
team. Well,
this was not just the side team. This was the
no, you know, that is when you're an intern and you've got all this whole team working for you. That's
right.
that was a not going to happen kind of thing that happens. And fortunately it did. More so for me than her, I'm sure, but it's good.
Well, certainly spent a fair amount of time with her when I used to go to conferences before I chickened out. Always, I think Janet and Donna certainly like to hang out together too. So that was always fun. Yeah. So before we came on, we were talking about some of the auto racing stuff, but I'm curious, I don't know that, I've ever talked about your time when you were on the reservation, when you were doing the Native American healthcare. So that's very fascinating to me. Like,
Same. Yeah, I actually wrote that down.
Yeah. So what were I don't even know where to begin. Like, what happened? What did you do there? What was it like? I'm a fantastic interviewer, I know, but
so the story goes like this. I went to a very expensive medical school. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Are you getting it too? Or is that just on my side somehow? Okay, good. So I went to a very expensive medical school that I couldn't afford. My parents were somewhat elderly by then. They were late developers. And so the government invited them to sell their house, and that would be a way to pay for my medical school, et cetera. So we looked for other options. And fortunately, the National Health Service was available back then. And I was able to join the National Health Service. But I could only be in a primary care. They wouldn't let me do it. I was kind of thinking about surgery back then and this and that. So anyway, I was EM/IM, and because I had the internal medicine background, they thought that was okay for joining the National Health Service deal. And but when it came time to actually do it, they decided that I could do emergency medicine. So I ended up going to Chinle, Arizona, which is in the heart of the Navajo Nation. And it was a pretty new facility. And we had an emergency department there with 3 or 4 beds. So myself and a partner of mine, who was this great guy who actually has worked in Sacramento for Kaiser for a number of years, another residency trained emergency physician. We were the 2 guys that ran the emergency department there. And then we had one family practitioner that we would bring in to kind of help out to fill out the schedule. And then we worked out so that we would be on when most of the blood and gut stuff would happen, which caused those other folks to have a little bit of sort of sphincter tightening events. And they were very happy if we would agree to do kind of the knife and gun club stuff there. And in addition, in the mornings, it's kind of funny, I guess it's funny to me, is that it turns out that Navajos have this endemic problem of ingrown toenails. So we had a toenail clinic that we used for infill to fill our mornings. So we would basically just do toenail removals in a line of people that came in, and the family practitioners would do well baby stuff and stuff that we didn't want to do as much. And so it all just was this kind of interesting accommodation. We did, lots of interesting stuff. It's the Navajo Nation is very spread out. No written language. People still live in traditional fashion. People live in hogans, octagonal shaped structures with dirt floors and a central stove in which 3 generations live. And they live way out on the res in different kind of places. And they would often amble in, with somebody injured or hurt in the back. And then they would have celebrations in which lots of people would get injured. And they would bring us in like a little truckload of people that were busted up. And then they rodeoed most nights. So we had all kinds of excitement from, how when your head goes forward and the bull's head comes back, it leads to sort of consequences that were described by Lafort. he could have used bulls instead of bowling balls, I think, or cannonballs or whatever he used for this, because it was it's a small place, but sometimes it really lit up, and we had to do some kind of exciting stuff. I actually did one successful thoracotomy in Chinle, which kind of boggles the imagination, but it worked out.
Oh wow!
Yeah, kind of weird. I actually had to do a median sternotomy on him. He'd gotten shot by a low caliber weapon, parasternal, and he was dropping his pressures, and there's all this blood coming out of the chest tube. And there was an old surgeon there who didn't feel comfortable doing it, so he and I did surgery. And so you have this old tool, you'd make a little notch in the manubrium, and you take this thing and you hammer it down to split the sternum. Yeah, it was kind of cool. And I actually had, in training, there was a little fight between the two institutions, so that the new place that got the pros from Dover to start a program in Chicago, I won't name names, didn't have fellows. So I became their fellow on the CV service. So I got to go in and harvest all the veins, and then I got to dab and squirt when they were putting the vessels and the grafts in. Anyways, I had a lot of experience kind of doing that sort of stuff in my own way. Anyway, so we popped this thing. Just had to oversew his mammary, which was bleeding like stink, and that saved it. It was not anything fancier than that, but it still counts as a win on I did a thoracotomy and it works scoreboard, especially when it's in the middle of the reservation on the desert. Just saying.
I don't have a win on that scoreboard, so I think
that's a tough one to win on. It's not an easy game to play, but that was one thing. So anyway, we had a great time down there. There's EMS on the reservations, its own sort of thing. It again, it's like any other place. It's different. Huge distances had to be traveled by the crews a lot of the time. It's very rural. Mostly looking at highest was intermediate level providers. We didn't have helicopter scene response, but we did use aircraft, mostly fixed wing, to get people out. We had to put down dash pots to light the runway at night. So kerosene-filled little dash pots, and then we would have the village safety officer or policeman drive the truck up and down the runway to get the cows and horses off of it. It's funny until someone, sticks a pencil in their eye, and unfortunately one flight crew did crash. It was not while I was there, by hitting an animal that was near the runway. Wow. So again, there was stuff, about that.
Sounds wild.
It was wild. It was wild and it was not wild, but when it was wild, it was really, really wild. And the ED got really, really busy. And Pankaj, my partner, was a great doctor, and so we both, had a certain level of competency, so we could move stuff through as it needed to be, as we sort of backed up with stuff. And then again, we were as good as we could be in terms of taking care of the big stuff. The weird thing too was that a lot of people were rotating through there as part of their commitment. So it was like an all-star cast of doctors at that hospital. It's kind of funny with my colleagues since then. One of them, the surgeon that came through, it wasn't the one I'm talking about, actually, after he was in Chinle for a while, went back to University of Colorado, where he worked with Dr. Starzl, and he's a transplant surgeon in Pittsburgh. I think he still is, but he was, one person on our team down there, very, very competent. Other people, another friend is a very prominent cardiologist in Denver now, another guy, big time gastroenterologist. So we had this kind of depth there, which was pretty astounding, of the kind of people that we had to draw on there. I was very fortunate. Yeah, it's pretty cool in its own way. My wife then did home health on the Navajo, which was really interesting because she had a driver who spoke Navajo, because many Navajo don't speak any English. The older people speak no English whatsoever. And Navajo, of course, is an unwritten language that was the code talkers, that helped us win World War II. Yeah. And so she would go there and she would see how folks lived in their own lives, which is something that EMS gets to do. Most time emergency physicians don't, and home health folks do. So she had some interesting stories from that as well.
Yeah, that was cool. That was interesting.
So how did you end up in Alaska ultimately?
So the Alaska thing was, so my group of peers that were my matriculating group were there a year before me. I was in a hardship posting, so it's called. And so most of the time you have to be for a certain period of time. So after my first 2 years, I was eligible to move on. I had 3 years to pay back. And all my buds were going away. So I was going to have to, become fast friends with a whole new group of people. And then, so we sort of looked around a little bit to see. And so I was offered a job in Anchorage at the Native Hospital up here. And well, we kind of thought, well, that's kind of a no, you can't lose on this one, right? Because as we thought then, Alaska is pretty much just like a big Colorado, not. And I had rank as a military rank, which meant to me at that point in time that you get, if you decide to leave at the end of your commitment, which for me was the following year, then you kind of take a compass and a map and you draw a circle from where you started to where you were, and you draw it. And so if you're in Alaska, you pretty much can go to Venezuela on the government's dime and they would ship all your tonnage, which if you're further along in life, you might have actual tons in your tonnage.
Right.
We could measure ours in pounds, right? We just didn't have that much stuff to ship. So Donna and I hopped in the car. She was 8 months pregnant with our first child. We had 3 dogs, about 350 pounds of dogs, and a little bit of stuff. We had a FJ40 Land Cruiser behind our Suburban, and we decided
you still have that? Do you still have that?
Don't talk to me about that, sir. This is a very, very sore point. The only thing that's a sore point than the FJ40 I gave away to some guy that I didn't even know effectively was the white 964 911 that I still should have in my garage that I decided for reasons unknown to me or any way to extract it. There's no needles you could inject in me. There's no things under the fingernails that ever helped me to understand why it is that I gave up that particular car. So those two still haunt me, and thank you for mentioning that. But we drove up with this thing in tow, dogs, and a wife with a bladder the size of an acorn because of gestation and stuff. Although she did it well, much better than I would, even without being gestating, honestly. But so it's a fair distance out. Anyway, so just another adventure in life. We buzz up there. The good news about being on the Alcan is that everything's a bathroom there. I mean, really, it's not like you have to make a reservation. There's a lot of open space.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here you are in Alaska, and you're working. You're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, what was your experience similar to as it was in Arizona? Was it samesies, ingrown toenails, and all the like, or did you have different? What was it like?
So it was different. So I'd gone to the Alaska Native Medical Center, which at that time was housed in the last standing structure that survived the '64 earthquake.
Yeah. And
I can tell you it survived it not by much. It looked like everything else around it was completely just knocked down. There was actually 2 other buildings that had stood, but this was a real, can I say shithole? I probably can't say.
Of course you can.
No,
no, we get the E-tag. It's all good. You can say
really?
shithole.
No, I don't think so, because it was a shithole, but why stress that? Because it really was. It was the worst. Anyway, so you go into the shithole and there's all this torn up linoleum and stuff when you go in, because there was no intention of making it any better, because eventually it's actually, they now have this beautiful new one that's up and running. It's just gorgeous, but this was not gorgeous. So it was kind of a weird working environment to begin with. And the exam rooms in an emergency department were these cubicles. How can you describe them? Kind of like in little interrogation rooms, maybe in one of the shows, but it would be somewhere like on the Gulag or maybe East Germany back when the Soviet bloc was in power. There was a door on one side in a hallway and then a door on the emergency department side of it. And these were fixed walls. And I can tell you that at least in one time I was surprised by a guy recently dead who'd been put in there. It's one of these things that there's no observation. I think he drank the phenol, honestly, that we had out to cauterize the toes, to finish up the toes we're doing. I really think that's what happened with this guy, that he had tend to kind of tilt towards the drink. And I think he saw this thing in a bottle that looked like something. So it was a bottle of carbolic acid, phenol, and it was pretty empty because the tray had not, from the prior toenail removal, had not been removed. So we did do some toenail removals there as well. It wasn't really our full gig. We had some other stuff we did as well, but toenails, we still did some toenails. And I think anyway, so it was a different, not exactly what you'd expect. And I came from, large teaching hospital and city in Chicago and Cook County and all that kind of stuff. And so this was, different. But not bad, but just different. And it was also basically, it was the Native hospital, so it was dedicated to the care of Alaska Natives. So it was an opportunity to learn more with the culture and interact them. And it was different than Chenley, of course, too, because now you're in a town of 300,000. It's an urban
Right.
area with other resources.
So
I mean, you've been there a long time now. I mean, when you went there, was it like, this is where we're going to be? Was that your thought? Or was it like, yeah, we'll be here for a year or two and then move on?
Right. No, we didn't know we were going to stay there. That was the thing. That was the plan, right? So we had the government exit plan after that first year. And so I kind of applied to and got on staff at the two hospitals in town. There's a Providence Hospital and HCA Hospital, and I was on staff at both those, and I was allowed to do some moonlighting. So I kind of got my toe in the water in both of those just to see how that felt. And at the same time, we looked for jobs elsewhere. So we went outside to Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, and started shopping for jobs too, to see how that would work. So, the job offers existed, and actually we were looking at some places in California, not quite sure about that, thinking about it. And one way I talked myself out of California, just by the by, was, of course, I do have a bad thing about cars. I mean, it's a bad thing. And I actually had, when I was so I used to moonlight a lot when I was in residency. I had like 3 or 4 jobs. I basically was going kind of all night, all day sort of thing. I would go leave my 12, however long we worked back then. Of course, don't get me started on how long we worked versus,
versus the kids today. And yeah,
we worked a lot. And so, but then I would leave working a lot, and I would try to stay awake long enough to get to my job in the south part of Chicago, or in Indiana, where I was on staff at a hospital while I was still a resident. And so, and those were called MLUs back in the day, right? And you could figure out what you could do with an MLU. An MLU was a source of currency. You could say, well, I would like to get new speakers. How many MLUs would that be? Well, that would be about, 2 MLUs. And so at one point in time, I decided, having done all this, I was about maybe in my 3rd year or 4 years residency, I needed a car because I was a Porsche guy. And so I managed to find a pretty well-used 1970 911T that I bought while I was still in residency. And I would commute back to the south side of Chicago in that, which was also kind of strange, to Gary, Indiana. I was actually to East Chicago, Indiana, which was a bit of a war zone back then. We had a bar nearby when I was working in that ER. They called the Bucket of Blood, and it seemed to be very, very appropriate because I only worked nights there. And it's either a baseball bat or a shotgun seemed to be how you entered the place and how you left. But anyway, I would park my car at that particular hospital after having driven through the south side of Chicago, which was a different kind of place back then. Nonetheless, it all worked out. And that Porsche went with me back to Arizona. So I had it while I was on the reservation too, which is probably not the best car for the reservation, but nevertheless, it was there. And then I sold it when we went to Alaska. You see, that's the point of this little story. But having gotten there, I said, well, if I'm not in California, you follow me? So if I'm not in California, then if I were in California, if I was in Southern California, what is the likelihood I would not have to have some type of German sports car, ultimately, given the fact that I have this sort of thing I can't control? And so the answer is absolutely would have to do that. How much would that cost? Well, it'd be nothing. Would you have to insure it? Yeah, you would, etc. So, and then you would pay sales tax and all those kinds of things we don't have in Alaska, as well as personal income tax. We just don't have those things. So one of the strong arguments initially for Alaska was, one, we're here, and 2, we have this bonus. So we could fly to Southern California first class every weekend, essentially, for what we'd be paying in personal income tax, state taxes, and that damn car that I'd have to have down there, which I wouldn't have to have up in Alaska.
Yeah. Which you ended up having to have in Alaska at some point.
As it turns out, you can only do so much with what's going on with your limbic system at any given time. And my favorite story my wife likes is I've had more than one of those, and I went in with my Touareg to get windshield wipers, and I came back with a Cayman.
Yeah, a Cayman.
It was a used Cayman. I was going to just race.
Anybody can afford a Cayman.
It wasn't.
You kind of fell for the upsell, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't even start.
You just wandered.
Waiting. But that car was for a specific purpose. It wasn't like it was just a luxury. I was going to race that car.
So at some point you interacted with, dealt with, somehow or other, you had EMTs and paramedics come into your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
what's kind of this, how did that whole thing get going, and where did your sort of desire for EMS kind of start coming in?
I guess, that way I would look at that is next to Donna, the medics were the next greatest thing in my life in terms of people that I deserve them more than they deserve me, maybe, or something. I mean, it's just been this wonderful odyssey of getting to stand on the shoulder of heroes. And so, I mean, quite honestly, the way it started was I just basically had interest in it for some time. In Anchorage, the way it worked, and when I first got here, was that there was a thing called a medical advisory board. So it was kind of, they were running the EMS system as a group, and the chairman of the board at that any given time would be the person that was kind of like the medical director, but there was nothing like that. Right. And then what was it called? FSLA, FSLA, the Fair Labor Standards, FLSA. I think I always get them reversed.
FSLA, yeah.
Yeah, FSLA. So that kind of raised its head, and then we figured out that we basically had a separate paramedic service from our fire service, and then it became apparent by that we had huge financial liabilities, and so they did what we called back then integration of the fire service. And when that was going on, we had consultants come up, and it was determined we probably should have a medical director too. So I applied to become the medical director in about 1993 or so. And I was the first and so far the only medical director for Anchorage Fire Department. So that was kind of, how I moved into that role. And then that just sort of took on its own life in terms of catching up with the role, learning. And so that's just become sort of a lifelong thing for me, and then branched out from there to become the sole focus of my practice.
So what was it that sort of drew you to you're calling them heroes. You're talking about this group of people that are out there doing this job. What was it that attracted you to that sort of those people and what the job they were doing out there?
Well, yeah, let me just also back that up a little bit. I like the word hero in its own way. I mean, it's a good way to say how you order something in a restaurant, or there's things you can do with the word hero. But hero is also just a jacked up word, isn't it? I mean, it's been just kind of, and so the heroic part of it for me has just been this sort of immense amount of actual compassion, and this group that really wants to do the right thing. Right. The point is that this is I'm also an emergency department chair. I've been involved in trying to teach emergency physicians, and quite honestly, if I turn sideways and show you the very flat spot on my forehead, it would explain how that process went. And I'm sure that's because I'm just not adept enough to convey information to other physicians in a way that they can actually use it and change practice. But I found that that EMS folks would never be pushovers. If you had the right EMS folks, I guess you could always subjugate somebody enough that they would just say yes. But my people would also say no. I mean, they would, if it was just batshit crazy, they would say, that's batshit crazy. We can't do that. You ever done this before, Doc? This is a stupid fucking thing to say. So they would, it would always work out that way. But at the same time, if I could convince them that if we all did this the same way, we did this or that, maybe we could push the rock uphill a little bit further. And, I just love that. It's like, the surgeon's thing of, gee whiz, you're on call only every other night. You're missing half the good cases. I mean, I didn't miss any of the good cases. I was able to show up on scene a couple of times, but moreover, I was able to see what had happened, talk to people, debrief them. So I knew everything that's going on in the community that, rose to a level of importance. And so much of the heroic stuff, heroic stuff's all very heroic. I mean, again, you're running out of the house with somebody on fire. That's good. It's good. Yeah. You should do that. But that's not what usually happens. The heroic stuff, honestly, is staying around long enough in some stinky person's house to hear what it is they have to say and to know why it is that they were sent away from the emergency department for 4 times and the problem hasn't been resolved.
Yeah. Did you guys get that all figured out there, by the way? Or you don't have that anymore?
We're working on it.
Yeah.
We are working on it. Yeah. We may have a little ways to go.
I think that's, for me, one of the things that I try to impress on paramedics that I work with is that they all come into it thinking they're going to drive really fast and swoop in with defibrillators and this and that. But the compassion is the heroic part. The compassion, and that's what that's what I want our crews to. That's the skill. That's probably the most important ALS skill you have in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, so I
or
guess
be
what
less
we're doing
guilty.
right now sort of embodies how I feel about this. So we spent a lot of time. I think it did probably as good a job as most did with regard to airway stuff. But it's one of these things that I always felt we could do better. And so over the past couple of years, we've spent an immense amount of time to improve how we provide airway care. We did not call it rapid sequence intubation. We called it, basically advanced airway management. Looking at it's the goal, not the journey kind of thing. That everything isn't just jamming a tube in, and having this thing be very goal directed, meeting standards and oxygenation standards, and actually using checklists and going back and looking at our code stat data and going through all this stuff. And so again, not to say that many other systems might be doing better, but this is a process that our group has embraced and people really take seriously. And, quite honestly, in my emergency department practice, I could do this for myself, and the nurses that knew me would work with me on this. But to make it be institutional wide, that everybody would agree with, I mean, I'm sure places do it, but I just found that to be such an immense challenge and with so many setbacks, that this to me has just been a much more rewarding way to take care of time-sensitive, life-threatening stuff. Just much better set up to do it in EMS from my department and my situation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think, when we look at the kind of quality improvement stuff that we do in EMS and it's all we all try to do it as a system, right? So that we're looking at, everybody's looking at the same criteria. Everybody's looking, and while quality improvement at the hospital is still very case-driven, case-based, and outcome-based, and not data-driven like we're doing in EMS to this day. And part of it is because we all grew up going through like a case-based sort of scenario-based M&M, right? The M&M is the way we learn, and I think that's great for interesting cases, but I don't think it's great for creating a baseline for performance.
No, I mean, one of the most terrifying phrases that I hear for like really shitty resuscitations that I witness and stuff is, I'm doing this because I'm residency trained, board certified, and I know how to do this. As opposed to I really care about this, and I've looked at the literature, and I've looked at my outcomes. That's just me.
That's just you. That's just you. So it'll be 30 years next year, right? At Anchorage?
It can't be that long. Sounds impossible. How could it be?
Again, when you were 1, you became the medical director.
It's amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Or when you were maybe -3.
It was easier back then.
That's amazing. I mean, we learn a lot about like when I was an EMS fellow and I took the NAMSP medical director's course, the folks who were on the faculty of that course had all been recently fired from their positions. Like nobody was actively working as a medical director.
I was taking it about the same time because it was Sandy Cool, it was Joe Ryan, it was the same. Yeah.
And Sandy was no longer working as a medical director. At the time, Pepe was not a medical director. I think Ray was a medical director because he's never really left that gig. But yeah, and I think the story in EMS of a medical director that's kind of been in one and kind of entrenched in a big system like yours is actually relatively rare. I mean, I think Seattle's had 2 medical directors, but it's a lot of places. It's a lot of turnover.
Sandy Kuhl during my medical director's course basically said, it's not if, but when somebody gets you in the back or what have you. And I've been on the edge of the cliff with one finger dangling with a mayor stamping on that one finger. It's not written that you'll always be in that position. I'm well aware of that. So I've been very fortunate.
What do you think in your system, what have been the top 2 most innovative things you guys have come up with over the last 30 years? What at the end of the day, if you had to pick 2 things that these 2 things have made a huge difference in the lives of the citizens or the visitors or the people that you serve, what do you think those 2 things would be?
Wow, look at you. Wish I had this
First
is like
actual
If
question.
you were a tree, no.
no, it's like, where do you want to be in 10 years? I want your job. I mean, I know
Right.
the answer to that one. So I don't know. I'm trying to think what the actual, I mean, we've done some great things, but I always feel like we've always done the R&D thing as opposed to it being totally homegrown.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about resuscitation and the like. And so, I'm very proud of what we did with our dispatch, but it was fashioned after Seattle King County. We were able to get criteria-based dispatch. And I think that made just this remarkable difference in terms of survivability. It astounded me because I would not have thought it was possible before. What a difference it makes to have CPR started 1 to 2 minutes earlier than 1 to 2 minutes later.
Yeah.
Where you have people fighting with you, telling you to stop. And when you stop, they're still in VF and not breathing. So I think from a hospital-based standpoint, none of the people ever see this and they don't believe it's true.
Right.
And so but we know it, we know. So I thought that was an extremely good thing. What else have we done? I mean, I just kind of go back to this more global thing that we've created a culture. Well, one of the things we did, I think is important, is, and this just comes back to culture as opposed to some gizmo or the like.
Sure.
I think culturally, we went through a period of time back in '93 and the like, where everybody had to integrate and no one wanted to integrate. And we had a lot of hate and discontent, and we had some bad words, and we had people who just did not want to cooperate with this plan. And then at one point in time, after many, many iterations of this, the city manager, with whom I developed a strong relationship with, told folks that there would be no hate speech, basically, that you could not say gut scow, you could not say putting on the skirt, you couldn't do all of these things that they used to demean medics. And so we called that I think it was the 432 moment. So that was the 432 rule, because after being in that room for hours, he looked at his watch and says, it's 432 and we should not speak this way again. And of course, you can't do that just with words, but you do it with culture. And so those people who wanted to be shits got to retire out. And those people that wanted to be part of a team stayed in. And, I think we've done an amazing job towards being a more integrated department. I don't think we are really integrated per se, because people, quote, promote into engineer and captain slots. For us, those are positions.
Yeah.
And for a variety of reasons, but it's still in the hierarchy. There's headroom in the fireside, and there's no sides. So that would be me having to leave the room at 432. But if you're, going down a suppression role as your primary focus, then, you have a little bit more headroom than you do when you're in the EMS role.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we do have the thing where we know that this is a team, that people do embrace the whole EMS role. We have a lot of paramedic captains who are my champion paramedics from the day that now are taking on new responsibility, new roles, new challenges, and that's good for them. So I think is the underpinnings of what leads to a system that can best care for its populace. And I think I'm real proud of that. I'll tell you another thing we do, just to put a third one on your 2 questions there, is we do spend a lot of time figuring out what can make a difference and what might just kill somebody instead. So how much of the stuff do we do? And that gets kind of back to the airway stuff, but getting rid of the kind of the prideful approach that I do this because it's what I do, and trying to look at whether or not that is. And I think, when I first started talking about limiting intubations and how we're going to do this, I think there was some pushback about, kind of the badgeism and defining yourself by what it is you do. And I just try to emphasize over and over again that, quite honestly, I think most of this stuff is monkey skill stuff that we take such pride in. But what goes on above the clavicles is what makes the 1,500 hours different than the 130 that you have within the EMS training spectrum.
Yeah, totally.
I think, wow, I think that's so spot on. I mean, I got to tell you, we've in our previous podcast and a couple years ago or last year when they were doing the EMS, reworking on the EMS scope of practice, and they put out that survey about scope of practice, and there was this big uproar that intubation was going to be removed from the paramedic scope of practice.
Yes.
That,
How
Mike?
dare you?
Both mics, and just the outcry that how dare you remove the babies will die, this life-saving skill, and again, the actual act of doing the intubation is probably the least important part of all of it. It's how you got there and what you do afterward that's just as important or more important. So.
Well, I had a great kind of one the other night with one of my smaller services that has got we have probably 3 paramedics, and they're pretty good. They're good. But I took away RSI or RSAP, we're calling it a DAM, from him because I want to emphasize that intubation is not a one-person deal, right? It's a team approach. And if you don't have a team that can support that level of an intervention, then we're probably better off not doing it. And so it was begrudgingly accepted we would stop doing that. And then the other night, I just did this run review the other night, they had a case where this guy was in florid pulmonary edema, and they're kind of chasing after the pulmonary edema and giving him some nitro, and they're kind of catching up with the guy in the CPAP and doing this and this. And he turns around, he gets better. And so the medic says to me, and doc, I mean, you hadn't taken away what he called RSI. If you hadn't taken RSI, we definitely wouldn't need to RSI this guy. I said, okay. So Mr. Hammer, and that was a nail. What was the outcome of your care? Well, we didn't intubate him. Did he suffer from that? No, he didn't. So what do we learn from this grasshopper? I mean, so to me, it was just a perfect embodiment of babies will burn, babies will die. But in fact, if we apply great clinical skills, more often than not, they don't.
Yeah, that's a great case. That's exactly spot on. Yeah, I mean, we're working on some of the culture, and I got to tell you, the last 2 years has made any kind of cultural integration harder because everything's been on Zoom. So we've not been able to train in person, and we will be doing that again finally the end of this month. But one of the things that I'm trying to do is pound. If your first thought is I need to throw this person in the back and get to the hospital, then you need to stop. Yeah. Because the first thing you need to do is take care of this patient. Because it doesn't matter if you can see the hospital, you are still 30 minutes away from anybody providing any kind of help. So, in most of our calls, we can't see the hospital. So you tell me what's better, 45 minutes without any support, or you taking care of the problem right now. And we had been on that journey, and then COVID happened, and I think we continue to talk about that but a lot of it is virtual and not in person, not as one-on-one and those sorts of things. So, that's one of those kind of cultural EMS culture things that we're trying real hard to work on here.
Well, congratulations. I think it's worth time spent.
So what's new? What's going on? What's the next big thing up in Anchorage? What are you guys working on? What's going on up there?
Well, for us, I want to say we're working on always keeping your head above water because there's always budget stuff, and I didn't really want to go down that pathway, but it's it's always a thing. Right now, we're actually transitioning over to installing Corti in our dispatch center. We're kind of going through the final phases of that. I think it's going to be successful. I hope I don't jinx myself by that. And it's kind of simultaneously with that, there's talk of an RCT that's kind of happening as well. But anyhow, I'm enthusiastic about that. Of course, we're going to use Corti. We're going to install our dispatch software essentially on top of Corti. So we'll no longer have CBD per se. It'll all go through Corti. So I'd initially thought of Corti as kind of a one-trick pony that's probably an arrest, nudge, why don't you call it an arrest. But we're going to use it for its AI for a much broader set of circumstances than that to aid.
Tell us a little bit more about that. Our dispatch center was involved in we at least went to one of the webinars on kind of the RCT that's being proposed, but I don't know much about it other than that.
I don't know as much about the RCT. I've just had the one meeting that Sayer put together. And so, the talk is just that to go beyond the premise that this actually improves. And I'm not sure even what the primary and secondary endpoints are, so I'll speak out of turn. But I mean, basically, it has to do is this really an improvement? Does it really have a clinical improvement or not?
But more about what you're like. I don't know much about the actual. I don't know what Cordy does, or I don't know it that well.
Right. So again, I'm probably not the expert to speak on it, but the gist of it is that we can use Cordy. We can install Cordy in such a fashion that we're doing our screens and the like, but it's actually going through Cordy. So with regard to our CBD, which is not that unlike MPDS, the dispatchers continue to go through the chief complaint type of initial page and go through the pathway for each of those things. But at the same time, there's an AI component to it that can help redirect the dispatcher to kind of short circuit the algorithmic approach and move more quickly to a potential answer. Again, it emphasizes the cardiac arrest. So if whatever screen you're in, Cordy hears this, there's a pop-up screen that comes up and it's kind of color-coded to maybe, more likely than not, and holy crap, you got to do something about this now kind of thing with regard to likely cardiac arrest. The other thing about it is, so on the one hand, you've got kind of the nuts and bolts of just doing day-to-day work. The other thing is the AI is used in a very sophisticated fashion to provide all kinds of quality improvement metrics and extractions for dispatch. Is what really attracts us, is that we'll be able to basically audit 100% of calls using AI, as opposed to having a lot of seat time, kind of going through things to find fallouts per se. So, again, it's going to look at all the types of timestamps and all that sort of thing. And depending on how you set filters and the like, it can rapidly, or so it's said, bring you back information that's sort of usable and actionable.
Sounds really good.
Yeah, I'm really enthusiastic about it. I wish that all of the geniuses involved in this that we see on the webinars we've had, it looked like they're over about 13 or so, because they've been doing it for some time, but they all, speak like they're all probably PhDs. But again, it's not me, but they're young appearing, very successful at doing really great things. Yeah, good for them and good for us.
Let's go back full circle a little bit here. We mentioned this earlier on, but we got a past president of NAMSP, we got the current president of NAMSP, and I know Ritu, you were curious what it was. We were talking about what is it like to be the president during a global pandemic. What do you want to add to that for Dr. Levy?
I mean, I had an easy term, right? I mean, we were just a brand new specialty at that time, and we were in full celebration mode when I was president. We did not have to deal with, I would say, as just a member now, where I've seen your leadership in particular has been navigating NAMSP through a really tough time. So how do you keep the lights on? How do you keep the organization moving forward? How do you keep the organization important, right? And then, this has also been the exact same time that all this ketamine garbage has been happening too. So I think those have been sort of two big challenges that, as a member of NAMSP, and as somebody who's been in some of the meetings and someone who talks to you quite not infrequently about some of this stuff, but that has been the place where I've seen your leadership really shine. But I was just wanting to get it straight from you. What kind of challenge? What did you see as the challenge? I don't know if we want to hit pandemonium first, or if you want to talk about ketamine, or kind of intertwine them.
Well, I guess what I'd like to start with is the absence of you in the meeting this morning with H&K. We had an hour to work through things with the quality bill, and could use some backup there, brother.
I was not invited to said meeting.
Well, I don't know why you wouldn't insinuate yourself into it then. I'm still having a hard time following that.
He just was going to check his email right now, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that, but his head turned.
He was going, I'm looking at my calendar like, somewhere. Is there an H&K?
Aren't you supposed to be on those? I don't know.
I was on those up until, but I was not on the one today.
Oh, interesting. Well, here's the thing. NAMSP. So first and foremost, I try to convey to people, not from a sense of marketing or sales, but from a true sense, from the bottom of my heart, that this, being a member of NMSP has been the most important professional thing I've done. It's this group of people that we've all become best friends, and we are just, it's just one of these common bond sort of things that's pretty extraordinary. It's like any other good friends. You miss them for a year or two and you pick up where the conversation left off. And it really is one of these things where an organization doesn't need to justify its existence by making up things it has to do or something like that. When we're together, and even when we do this by distance, there's so many things that we all need to talk about, because most of us, as we do medical direction, even for decades, are still feeling kind of white man, orange tip stick as we walk around. There's so much gray area in what we do, so many things changing, and no one right way to do everything. So this networking, this collaboration, this being there with your peers, and peers meaning doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, paramedics, admin, which is what comprises the membership. So that on the one hand, it's home, and two, to be the president of it. Again, I just kind of stand back, kind of buckaroo banzai, all the fortunate things I've had happen to me. It's just kind of astounding to be the president. To me, I guess I don't even think of myself as president. I just think I'm just in a fortunate position of getting to chauffeur somebody else's car around. I guess the way I look at it. I guess I'm hoping to be able to pick the right route home, but beyond that, I don't feel an intrinsic sense of over proud about it. I feel the responsibility, and I'm very happy to have had the opportunity. Not many people have had that. With regard to being the president during the pandemic, I mostly got through it, frankly, by crying myself to sleep most nights.
Sucking on your thumb?
There was a little of that, and most of the time there was some head banging. There was that. I just put on AC/DC and no one knew, but it was kind of disappointing to not be able to get out and do kind of presidential stuff. Quite honestly, to go out and the fact that the conference didn't go off in my first year, when I was the incoming and that transition, I was disappointed in that. But I always pointed out that in my disappointment, I did not find myself being disappointed in a prone position with an intratracheal tube in. So compared to people who really suffered greater disappointment than me, I thought that mine was pretty minor in the big scope of things. And I, try to keep that first and foremost. My family stayed healthy. Most of my providers stayed very healthy. We lost no one to this. And and then just trying to keep up thing. I think the good news about the pandemic is that we were all sucking wind together. And so people didn't expect you to make the pandemic go away. Everybody was understanding of our limitations and the like. And so I think, given the fact that, again, going back to why NSP is a great deal, I don't feel like I was dealing with a bunch of judgmental people that were worrying about this or worrying about that. They were happy for anything we could bring forward in terms of guidance, help, support. But at the same time, there was no feeling like I had to produce day in, day out, or I was going to get bad things and there was going to be a second election. I was going to be kicked out.
Special election,
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, from my perspective, just even over the last few months, the people in that organization that have come together and put out essentially the standard of practice for airway management with the compendium coming out. What are your thoughts on the people that just kicked ass on that? What does that mean to you as an organization, NMSP being involved in that and really setting the stage, setting the standard for airway management in
collector's edition? Well, here's the thing. I was sitting around, and between sobbing and stuff, it did dawn on me. What happened with that was I saw somebody was getting ready to do something on paramedic education for airway or something. I said, whoa. Why aren't we doing that? And so it just dawned on me that honestly, that this is a space that NAEMSP should own. And we shouldn't be looking to, I won't mention names, but whoever it was is going to tell us, well, let's mention names, like the Society of Anesthesia telling us how to intubate somebody in the field. I mean, I would never have gotten over that. There was no amount of Zofran that would make me swallow normally if that were to happen, right? And so, anyway, so I started kind of noodling on that. And I think I might have called Henry next or something, but I said, what would you think about this? And before you know it, we had, I got a group together of an editorial group, which are listed there. I can name them by name if you want. But this fantastic group of editors, we started meeting every week, starting about last January. We, at some point, we brought Dave Cohn in to help be our reality guide in terms of when we'd have to have this done to get the publishers to take it, and that was October. And then, we just started cat herding. So Chris Colwell's role as an editorial board was the chief cat herder to start with. He was going to have to help us rein in initially the at least 6 authors per subject, but also we had this great concern about the fact that we wanted this to be peer reviewed. So each of the position statements, resource documents, had to have 2 peer reviewers through PEC. And not only had to do it, but they had to get it done, which, you've all done some reviews and it's easier to start it than it is to finish it. So we had to kind of ride herd on all that. So anyway, we got this great talented group of people together. We then found that the pediatric group was already planning on publishing similar guidelines. And so we got together with Nicole and Marianne Gaucher and other notables I should have said Joelle was actually the lead on that. So when you edit that out, that's Joelle, not Nicole. Nicole's one of our editors, but that was not her primary thing. But Joelle was able to work through bringing that group in to set up 3 more papers within the compendium that brought the pediatric, important pediatric information forward. Anyway, to me, it was this amazing thing. I don't want to diminish what the Apollo people did, but this was an important thing that, I think ended up, I think it's important. I think it was great that this was unequivocally staked out as ground that we have the right to opine on. And our stuff was evidence informed. We talked about grade and PICO and this and that. And we all decided we wanted to do it before we'd be tripping over our walkers and our Foley catheters. We wanted to get to a point where we could actually complete this. And so we felt that evidence informed with evidence based to the extent possible is the way to go. And bada bang, bada boom, that worked. Very proud about that. And it was a way to spend part of the COVID years.
Well, we've already found it to be useful and helpful, and we're going to continue to we've only scratched the surface, though. There's so much in the compendium there's a lot there. Every time I open it up and leaf through pages and read here and there, I just learn something new, or like, oh yeah, we should be doing that or this. So it's already made an impact in just literally 2 months. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I'll just add to that in terms of me just kind of fawning over NMASP. So we have this group of really, really talented, busy people. And I made calls, Henry made calls, whoever made calls to various people to be leads. And I think every single one of them says, yeah, I can do that. And you want it when? Oh, okay, good. And you want how many people? Great. And so, I mean, I don't know what other organization like ours could bring together that group of people with that timeline to do that level of work, and make it work and make everybody sort of happy they did it, as opposed to being browbeat and forced into it. But it really, to me, pretty astounding.
Yeah, I think there definitely is in our organization. What can I do for the organization and the profession versus members of maybe larger professional societies who are, what can the organization do for me? I think that the vast majority of our membership is, what can I do? What can I do for this specialty? And I need to belong to NEMSP because I need to help NEMSP. We need to together do these things, not can NEMSP give me something. Yeah. I really do feel much that this organization, much more so than any other one, is like that. Wow, it's been like an hour and a half, almost an hour and a half that we've been talking. It's always good to reconnect, Mike. I look forward to being in the same room with you again. Hopefully it'll be sometime before next January. I don't know where, but you hit the nail on the head.
A cool EMS conference in Anchorage.
We're not going to have one this year.
Are you going to have one?
Not this year, or maybe next year. It's just a heavy lift, and this is not the time to do it. But yeah, the RACI conference, was great. We enjoyed doing that for so many years.
I love that conference, and I certainly enjoyed the times that you let me and Bob Niskanen co-moderate that conference.
You guys did great. That was fantastic.
We had a fun time doing that together.
I think we need to bring Daltrey together again. Get that crew together. We could do that. Do some
they're coming back to Portland.
Is that a fact? Gee whiz.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to come back down. The tickets are a lot more expensive than they were when we went.
Well, this is because this is one of those. How many more times will they be able to do this? Really?
Yeah. Well, when I saw them in the '80s, it was how many more times will they be able to do it? Mike flew down probably 4 or 5 years ago to come see the Who at Moda Center. Come stayed at our house.
I remember that concert.
Oh. And we went and saw the Who.
Yeah,
we had a great time. Great time. But I've it's great to reconnect, and you've been certainly the last 2 years, but I've known you for a long time, and when you started getting involved in the board, I knew that you were going to be president of NAMSP someday. So I think I maybe told you that. Your leadership has been well recognized, and you've, for a really tough time, done a great job. And I'm just really hoping that folks take a listen to this and get to know you a little bit better, and just understand kind of a little bit more where you're coming from. And I look forward to, you're rolling off the board in another couple of years, but this is still the beginning. There's so much more to do once you're off the NMSP bandwagon. And I look forward to what's next from Mike Levy. So very excited.
Thank you. I'm honored, surprised and honored you guys wanted to talk to me. So I appreciate the opportunity.
It was Oliver too. So I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. Well, I will get us out of here. On behalf of Dr. Mike Levy, Dr. Ritusani, Mike Verkest, you've been watching to and listening to the EMS show. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a great day, you guys.
Hey, thanks for listening to the EMS show. Let's continue this conversation. What do you say? Check out the official Facebook page and Twitter feed. The EMS show is a Firedog production.